congratulations on the film.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So that was fun last night. I have to say, we did a Q&A last night, and I really loved being on stage and hearing all the kids asking the questions, and I thought it was cool the kinds of questions that they were asking. What was your take on having the kids react immediately after seeing the movie?
Well, I've never experienced that before, and I was struck by some of the questions, particularly the little girl. I guess she was 7, 8, 9, who asked, did we draw one penguin, and then have to draw every one of them, and so on. I was very impressed how we found the music, the color, and so on. I was very impressed. I haven't seen the movie with kids yet, and but I'm told they're responding well.
Well, I saw it with that audience of kids last night, and they are responding well. And it was funny, normally when anyone talks at a movie, it drives me crazy. But hearing the kids sort of, they can't help themselves almost responding to what's happening on the screen, I thought was really fun because it isn't a traditional kids movie, I don't think. And I say that because, and we talked about this a bit last night, but I say that because it feels to me much more cinematic than kids' movies generally are. It feels to me a little looser in its storytelling, and I can explain, if you don't agree, I can explain what I mean by that. But it just feels different. It has a different kind of feel to it, and I think that's what struck a chord with the first movie, is that it wasn't like any kids' movie that anyone had seen before. Did you set out to make something that broke molds, or is just this your vision of what a kids' movie could be or should be?
I think you're definitely not trying to ape other films. There's no question. There has to be a product difference. There has to be something different that you feel about your film. And the way to approach that is just make the best story you can after a while. Be aware that you're playing to an audience, but not specifically to a kid's audience. You just have to be aware that you're looking for clarity and rhythm and as much of an emotional flow as you can get. Keep it alive and interesting. So if you really were to look at the movie in a very in a very granular way, you'd notice, even though the characters all look the same and the sets, and it's all ice and snow and water and so on, that basically we very rarely repeat camera angles. You're always refreshing the ideas, because very easy to bore kids and so on. But what do you mean by looser?
Well, looser, the story, there's very definitely a story, and there's a number of stories going on here. You've got the story of, as I like to call them, the existential shrimp, the penguin, the krill, Will and Bill. You have the story of the rescue. There's a lot of stories here, but I like how you get to know the characters first. And I like the setup of the movie. There's a song right off the top. There is you come to understand that Eric isn't like his father, and so you realize it's going to be a father and son story above all. But for me, I just felt that the story flows really easily with the look of the movie. No, maybe that's not. Maybe it's the story isn't as epic as the movie looks. And I think that maybe, and I mean that in the best way. I think that the movie is so grand in its style, and the story and the stories are intimate. And I like that. I like that there's smaller stories set against this huge palette.
That's really interesting that you say that, because if you look at the first Happy Feet, it is a more epic story because it follows the main character from the moment he's born all the way through to young adulthood. This story only happens over 3 or 4 days at the most, and depending how long they spend in that blizzard. And in that case, it's sort of things happen very quickly. There's an urgency to what's happening, and you're right. Until you said it, I didn't realize it was quite that. But it is. It's the stories themselves are smaller, more intimate moments with the characters.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that kids were relating to. Kids are going to like this because there is nothing cuter than Eric the little baby penguin, and I think the krill. I think people are going to love them, even if the kids don't understand really what it is they're talking about. And there is no free will, the little jokes like that. I don't know that they're going to get necessarily, but I think they're going to love those characters. But beyond that, though, I think that because the stories are kind of more intimate, they're more relatable somehow. I mean, these kids aren't being left out in blizzards, obviously, but there is the father-son thing I think kids will respond to immediately, and I think that adults will as well. But I think that this storytelling is really suited for the kids in the audience, and certainly that's what I saw last night.
Oh, okay, good. One of the things we try to do, because, I've been asked a lot whether, what all these Mad Maxes and Babes and Penguin films have in common. One thing that I'm drawn to unconsciously is the hero myth. The hero is agent of change and so on. And I thought about Happy Feet 2 in a sense being a more immediate story. It's not a saga, it's not a hero myth, except from the point of view of Will the Krill. From their point of view, the world is epic because they're so tiny, and he goes off on a classic hero myth, leaving, going out, looking into the unknown, confronting great dangers, and bringing a boon back to his world. But that's that. So,
well, he was to me the classic little guy who's against all odds striking out,
yes.
and this is, it's a classic story, but I loved that storyline.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was a lot of fun, and mainly also that we were, as you pointed out, if the film had was in a truncated time period, it was important to try to make it epic from some point of view. So from the Krill's point of view, it's a very big world, a very big universe out there. We saw it almost like space explorers, wanting to go out beyond their world and explore.
Well, and leave their pack, leave that huge mass of krill, the millions of other krill that they live with.
Yeah.
And change their lives. Stop being something. I mean, that story is really sort of epic in many ways. I mean, they're changing their whole way of life, and I don't want to give anything away. But then they realize that family is important too.
Yeah.
Something I think is going to resonate with people.
Yeah, I think so. Ultimately, it's where you come back to. It's that everyone is brought apart in some way.
Right.
They begin by being torn apart in some way, and it's only in the coming together that they're able to solve the problem. And that was interesting to me, to just see we took all these characters, each of them pretty decent in their own way. Even Sven, who's he's a really good-hearted guy, even though he's a fraud. He's a pretty good-hearted guy. He tries his best. He does the best he can with what he's got.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that is sort of the theme of the film in a lot of ways, or one of the themes of the film is discovering what your family is. Sven doesn't have a family anymore, so he creates another one around him. The krill come by. I don't want to give away the end of the movie, but and Eric comes to understand that going outside his family maybe isn't the best thing for him, that his family is very important, and he just didn't recognize it. The older you get, the smarter your father gets, I think.
That's nicely put. It's so true, isn't it? Yeah. That's really good.
Now, with your family, you have daughters. You wrote, one of which helped write a song for this. Are you? And I'm not getting personal. I don't do that in the years. But in terms of family life, how important is it to work with your family, to have them around? You're a twin, and and so I think that there's a different bond there than most brothers have.
With twins, with my twin, I know because we spent our first 24 years together. I always was used to playing with somebody. And so on. So it probably makes me a little bit more collaborative than I would otherwise be. In terms of my own working with my family, my daughter was more out of desperation. She's a very talented writer in her own right. She's 25 now, and we had three well-known writers of musicals have written musicals in Australia to try to write some lyrics to that Puccini opera. And it just wasn't working. It was overly elaborate. So I called her, and she's a musician herself, and I called her and said, look, can we just sit down together and work through it? And in 2 hours, she had it. And so that was more out of desperation than wanting specifically to work with my daughter.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a showstopper. That number when little Eric hits that first high note, that kind of thing that he does, so funny.
Yeah.
Everybody, it brought the audience to a stop. People were, it's a great moment.
Good.
I guess you never really know what's going to hit people, right?
You just don't know. You put it out there. You follow your instinct. You say this feels like it might work, but until you actually see it and feel it, yeah. And you don't know with any movie.
Right.